So, citizen advocacy is yet another form of freely given relationship, and hopefully by the time I've finished talking you'll get the real gist of that, and hopefully you'll be a little bit more inspired about the notion as well. So, friendship. As you're all in the room here today, I'm hopeful that that means that you've got at least a passing interest in the notion of friendship, and I think that's fabulous. I see friendship as a practical expression of our DNA as human beings who are quite possibly the consummate or most accomplished of all social animals. The Crew Conference materials, from which I've taken this quote, tell us that we can't buy friends. And how true is that? I'm sure all of you have seen instances, either in real life or on television or in a play, where those chickens have come home to roost. We can't make people be friends, but we can do some things that increase the chances for friendship and connection to happen. So why does friendship matter? Many people, particularly people with intellectual or cognitive disability, have little or no control over where they live, who they live with, and what they do day to day. Many have few, if any, freely given relationships because most people are actually paid just to be in their lives. Many people with cognitive or intellectual impairment are at ongoing risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and worse. And our recent Royal Commission has been, I dare say, a very bold way in which we can learn the hard lessons of the truth of that statement. Without friendship, life can be very, very lonely. In a 2015 analysis that compiled data on more than 3.4 million people across 70 separate studies, researchers found that the absence of social connections carried the same health risk as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Eek. Loneliness leads to worse outcomes than obesity, and the findings held true for people of all ages. Meaningful connections, especially friendships, can be powerful antidotes to loneliness. Let's look at some of the benefits of friendship. I'm sure all of you can come up with dozens of additional benefits, but here are a few just to get the picture. So friendship can provide a sense of belonging, can boost your self-esteem, reduce stress, offers emotional support, helps combat loneliness, encourages healthy habits, and I'm talking primarily there about healthy social habits, and contributes to a happier and more fulfilling life by creating strong social connections with people who help you to feel valued. Some positive indicators or elements of friendship. So how do you know if you've got a true friend? This slide gives a tiny insight into some of the telltale signs. A true friend will stick up for you when you're being put down or done over. They'll always stand at your side. They'll lend you their shoulders when you're sad. They can make you laugh, and in my case, often when I shouldn't be laughing. They can make you feel safe. They like you for you. And they can help you become who you're actually meant to be, so they can elevate where you are to where you could be. Not surprisingly, all of those features can also be attributed to a citizen advocacy relationship. So what is citizen advocacy? Citizen advocacy is a clearly laid out means to help vulnerable people in our local communities. This form of advocacy was developed by Dr. Wolf Wolfensberger in 1966, just a little tiny bit after I was born, at which participants asked, "What happens to my child when I'm gone?" It's a very powerful question that I'm sure some in this room have asked, but I've heard it over and over and over again in my lifetime. Dr. Wolfensberger was best known for developing social role valorisation theory and was in attendance at this conference, took note of the limitations of each of the protective measures that were discussed, and then in response, he conceptualised an advocacy scheme with the desirable elements that would become known just a little later in 1968 as citizen advocacy. Before we go any further, because I'm talking about the word advocacy and it can be a bit confusing for those who might not be immersed in that day to day, I'm going to just talk about a few of the different forms of disability advocacy. So most of us will understand the notion of individual advocacy. And this is formal advocacy which is often undertaken by paid and skilled staff. Not always illegal, but people who have the nous to be able to address a range of different issues. Sometimes they can focus on a single issue. For instance, I was once an NDIS appeals advocate, and that's all I did. Wasn't a very good time of my career, mind you, but that's just one extreme example of an exclusive form of advocacy. Individual advocacy is often delivered by not-for-profit organisations that are funded by government, sometimes with an additional income stream through a trust or some other fortunate benefit. It's usually free of charge, but not always. So that's something for clever eyes to keep an eye out for. So, citizen advocacy. It promotes, defends the rights and well-being and interests of people with an intellectual or cognitive disability by finding and supporting caring, responsible citizens who make a long-term, voluntary, unpaid commitment and who are prepared to make a positive difference in the life of a person who could be lonely, socially isolated, but who also perhaps face difficult challenges or circumstances, either previously or right now, or it's more than likely going to happen in the future because of what we know about the progress of life for people throughout our different age rankings. Those people are often in at-risk situations that citizen advocacy can help ameliorate. It can provide some of the best features of a protective relationship, safeguarding people with their mere presence. The preventative action through routine and regular oversight of a person's day-to-day life, and early intervention as soon as a risk or actual harm is identified. Some of you will also have heard of systems advocacy, and as the name suggests, it's primarily concerned with influencing and changing a system or the system or multiple systems in ways that will benefit people with disability as a whole, as a group within society. Systems advocates encourage changes to the law, to government or service policies and community attitudes. Most systems advocacy organisations don't also do individual advocacy. However, in Queensland, Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion and Amparo are two examples where they do both. Family advocacy. Family advocacy looks at issues that affect the person with the disability and their family. The focus is on the needs of the person with disability, not the parents or the family. However, some family advocacy does focus on the needs of the parents first. Whilst parents have substantial needs for support and resources generally, when we talk about family advocacy, we mean advocacy for people with disability. Examples could include parent-to-parent And I don't know if she's in the room here today, but we have Cecile Sullivan Elder from Family Advocacy New South Wales, another fabulous family advocacy organisation. Some of you will know about self-advocacy and perhaps even engaged in it. And obviously it's undertaken by a person or a group that shares the same characteristics or interests on behalf of the same person or group. The difficulty with conducting this form of advocacy is that sometimes, probably not even often, but sometimes, those who are undertaking self-advocacy and speaking up for themselves risk being further exposed and more vulnerable to abuse, discrimination and ridicule because they've had the effrontery to stand up for themselves. Shocking, isn't it? And peer advocacy. So peer advocacy refers to one-to-one support provided by advocates with a similar disability or experience to another person, often, but not always, in a service provision context. Trained and supported volunteers often provide peer advocacy as part of a coordinated project. Peer advocacy schemes argue that they are particularly well placed to empathise with the needs of people, to approach them as equals, and to feel strongly about and fight hard for their needs. And I thoroughly agree with that. QDN has a strong peer support network here in Queensland. So they're just a few examples I thought would be useful to share. But to go back to citizen advocacy. Citizen advocacy has a generally accepted definition, and there are variations of this that float around, but this is the one I'm going to offer today. Citizen advocacy is always active. It's speaking, acting and writing with minimal conflict of interest. We can't say no conflict of interest because there's probably barely a human relationship on earth that can boast that. It's always on behalf of the interests of the disadvantaged person. It's primarily concerned with their needs. It's about being on their side, and particularly no one else's side. Remaining loyal and accountable to them in a way which is emphatic and vigorous. And quite often it can be costly to the individual, not just financially costly, but it can be costly to their reputation, costly to their career, costly to their family life, and so on. So, why is it called citizen advocacy? Because it's based on carefully and freely given relationships between everyday citizens and people with disabilities. It's one-to-one, and it's between a person with a disability who has unmet needs, which we refer to as the protégé, and a competent citizen who is unpaid, the advocate. Advocates understand their protégé and represent their interests as if they were their own. So there's no holding back, oh, this is just my protégé. We go in hard and fast when the need arises. The commitment of the advocate to the protégé can last a lifetime. The role of the Citizen Advocacy Office is also important to understand. The Citizen Advocacy Office is independent of service providers and is responsible for recruiting, orienting and matching the advocate and the protégé. It's also responsible for supporting the advocates in their relationships as they respond to the advocacy needs of the protégé. There are 8 citizen advocacy programs in Australia located in each state and territory, but more power to Queensland. We're the only one with 2 programs, but it doesn't even touch the sides. Capricorn Citizen Advocacy program, and I'm very delighted to have my colleague Ben in the room today, who is our Citizen Advocacy Coordinator. We started back in the year 2000. Oh, and I saw Donna. Donna's also our other advocate in the program, so it's great to have her here too. We started in the year 2000 and we are the only citizen advocacy program in Australia that is state government funded. So if you are looking for a citizen advocacy program in Australia and you think, oh, well, Queensland will be on the NDAP or National Disability Advocacy Program website, you won't see us there. We're on the QDAP, Queensland Disability Advocacy Program website. So our program covers only 2 local government areas, and that's the Rockhampton local government area and the Livingston local government area, which predominantly includes the beautiful Capricorn coast where Shelley and I are lucky enough to live. So, some typical citizen advocacy roles. Lo and behold, that very first one, friend, confidant, peer and companion, spokesperson, role model and mentor, guide, advisor, guardian, and some people as advocates have also taken on formal roles such as adoptive parent. So that's a pretty darn serious commitment. In citizen advocacy, it's broadly structured under 2 headings. So those 2 broad headings are instrumental and expressive. So on the left side, we'll see instrumental needs. And these are needs that are of a practical nature. Things like, where do I live? How do I get some support? I've got some legal problems. I've got some health problems. The advocate will help to address those needs through practical, on-the-ground, physical support. The other area is where friendship comes in, and this is what we call the expressive side of a citizen advocacy relationship. So these are the needs of a protégé, which are of an emotional, communicative and social nature. The expressive tasks include actions and commitments that are undertaken by a citizen advocate to meet those needs. So instrumental, it's when we go in pretty darn hard as an advocate, and the expressive is a whole range of other things that can help open up a person's life in that sort of friendship zone. All citizen advocacy relationships are unique. Some are highly instrumental at certain times, some remain predominantly instrumental over time. And that includes lots of spokesmanship or representation and potentially a less expressive side to that citizen advocacy relationship. Some are much more expressive and friendship-based and only occasionally become instrumental. The degrees to which each relationship varies, and are as individual as the parties in the relationship itself. Citizen advocacy relationships grow and evolve over time, and particularly in response to any situations that are happening at a given point in time. Why does citizen advocacy matter? Well, as we no doubt are getting the gist, it's one way in which we can intentionally establish relationships that can have a friendship element to them. I've heard about circles just before, which is another intentional way to go about forming relationships, and that's very dear to my heart too. So citizen advocacy matters firstly because it's common for people with an intellectual or cognitive impairment in particular to face barriers to having an ordinary good life and feeling like they belong in their own communities. Secondly, because good communities are made up of all people, and all people have valuable contributions to offer. These sometimes need help to be brought forward. Citizen advocacy plays a part in fostering more inclusive communities. And third, citizen advocacy is a way to put our values into action on behalf of one other person by creating opportunities for positive experiences, by reducing the risks that they may be vulnerable to. Who benefits from a citizen advocacy relationship? I'm going to run through a few different categories. The first and the obvious one is the protégé, him or herself. And I just want to make mention that the word protégé has a number of different meanings, but protégé has been chosen out of a very, very difficult process of trying to use an appropriate word, because the word protégé is defined as a person who is guided and supported by a more experienced or influential person. For any of you who are buffs of old movies, you might be aware that the word protégé was actually quite a badge of honour for many people decades, even centuries ago, particularly in the area of the arts, in literature and old trades. If someone was known as a protégé of Jenny Smith, not talking about modern day, that would be quite an honour, and it could be very, very important for a family to spout about it. So advantages of a citizen advocacy match for the protégé include new opportunities and participating in positive everyday experiences, gaining greater self-confidence and esteem, belonging to the community via friendships and networks, protection from neglect, exploitation, abuse, discrimination and all those yucky things. Having someone in their life who's not paid but willing to be there for them. For the citizen advocate, there's a great sense of satisfaction that comes from gaining justice and positive change in someone's life. We can gain knowledge and moral insight to our society. So it's not all a bed of roses. There are some really hard truths that need to be approached by a citizen advocate, but that can be very empowering for our own identity as a human being as well. Rising to meet personal challenges and discovering previously unknown strengths and capacities, and meeting people who share similar experiences and values. There are a number of other people who also benefit from a citizen advocacy relationship. First of all, I'm going to talk about what it means for new connections that a citizen advocate may have facilitated. These new connections get the opportunity to meet someone with different life experiences, gifts, challenges, and who can bring a whole range of new insights into the importance of leading a good life. Advantages for family and friends. They get to enjoy the fact that their loved one is enjoying relationships with someone who's outside that family circle, not paid to be there, and who is committed to expanding the protégé's horizons, to safeguarding their interests and striving towards that good life that I think we all know is one of the great goals of CREW. And for the community, the gift of more actively participating individuals enriches our society in a social sense. And as the NDIS has been very wont to say, in an economic sense. So let's play that game too. And for service systems. Citizen advocacy, through its natural preventative and early intervention potential, reduces the need for many individuals to seek support from systems, to the extent that they might, had they not been matched with a citizen advocate. So a citizen advocate can be that circuit breaker to having to seek help from a service system. Come on, yay. I'm going to very briefly talk about my personal relationship as a citizen advocate. I first met Elizabeth in 1991 when we both did our very first, and certainly wasn't our last, SRV training together. We hit it off and became friends. I later met her son Selwyn through my work in disability services. We got to know each other as family friends. In 2006, CREW offered a multi-month course known then as Pave the Way, that assisted family members to engage in visioning the best possible future for their loved ones with a disability. Elizabeth invited me to go along to that with her, and quite frankly, I was honoured to do that, and we had a great time. Selwyn remained living with Elizabeth at home right up until her death in January 2014. That was less than 3 months after I lost my first husband. I was still grieving, but I was approached by the coordinator at the time at Capricorn Citizen Advocacy, which I've been involved in since its inception, that's why I love it, to take up the role of what we call crisis advocate. And that was to help usher Selwyn through the next stage of his life. I took on that role and we made some erratic progress in shaping new living arrangements, navigating the guardianship environment and firming up family relationships. Once things settled down and Selwyn's crises had passed, I was asked to remain on as Selwyn's ongoing citizen advocate, and of course I readily agreed. We've been matched for more than 11 years now, and our relationship is predominantly expressive or friendship, because hopefully most of those instrumental issues will have been well taken care of and will continue to reap the fruits of our collective work. In our relationship, I work very closely with one of Selwyn's brothers, who has a formal appointment for both guardianship and administration. Now, he lives in New South Wales, so he sees me very much as his ears and eyes on the ground. It's potentially an unusual arrangement in a citizen advocacy relationship, but it works really well for us. It also gives me the opportunity to ensure that family remains at the forefront of that relationship, of that family dynamic. It's working well for all of us, although there are aspects of Selwyn's life that I'd still like to improve. Now, before I move on, I'd just like to confirm, in the spirit of ensuring people's privacy, that I have sought and obtained permission to share that little passage about my relationship with Selwyn and the photographs. I miss her a lot still. She was a great woman. I'm just going to tell you a few brief additional stories. Linda and Charlene were first introduced to each other in 1980. Charlene was hoping to meet someone that she could trust to help her with some personal and practical matters that her blindness made difficult. Who could have imagined that over a 45-year period, these two women would become the best of friends, sharing all of life's ups and downs? That's a long commitment, but it happens. It's the beauty of citizen advocacy. Most people, when they're first introduced to citizen advocacy, have a whole bundle of questions. I'm going to try and circumvent those by answering those that are pretty obvious to me. How long do citizen advocacy relationships last? Well, as I've mentioned in that story there, at least 45 years. I'm aware of at least two, potentially 3 relationships in Australia that have eclipsed 30 years. In our program, it's a bit over 20 years. 25, well, there you go, thank you. Other relationships might discontinue if one party moves away, but even then the relationship can remain in place, or if either party is no longer interested in sustaining the relationship. What backgrounds do citizen advocates have? All around the world they have a diverse range of backgrounds and professions, but they're always recruited because of their skills, sometimes because of their qualifications, always because they have strong standing in the community and will actually be taken seriously. They're recruited for their problem-solving abilities, their tenacity, their communication skills, their sense of justice, their consciousness of role modelling that they can undertake in front of others in the community in general, and because they're prepared to be there for the long haul. It's not just a matter of, okay, I'll give it a try. And if it's too hard, well, we'll just finish that up. For anyone who's done any social role valorisation training, you'll know the very deep wound that sort of rejection can cause. But even if you're not familiar with SRV, it's readily evident how demoralising that could be to the protégé. I'm going to skip a couple of these. Some of the differences, I think, are really important between citizen advocacy and individual advocacy. As I said before, a citizen advocate can facilitate an early intervention or even a preventative approach to issues that before they arise or become serious, simply because the citizen advocate is there in the person's life and they can see things coming, and there's almost, without exception, before issues could ever be brought to the attention of an available individual advocacy agency to address. I recently heard citizen advocacy described as transformative and individual advocacy described as transactional. Let me make it clear, that's not to diminish or denigrate the importance of individual advocacy. I've been there, I've been an individual advocate. That's not to put any less value on the importance or power and the outcomes achieved by individual advocacy, but rather to help others understand that given the nature of citizen advocacy as I've described it, it has greater prospects of facilitating multiple outcomes and positive changes in people's lives, whilst also acting as an ongoing safeguarding mechanism. In closing, I'd like to quote a fellow board member from our program who is also here, and he's one of those guys whose relationship continued even though he and his protégé lived a long way away from each other after a while. Peter Edmonds said, "You can never have too many good mates." In response to that, Peter's protégé, the late, sadly late, Mitchell Bell, replied, "He's more than an advocate. We've just really become good friends." Thank you, everyone.